A fully geared Warlock is one of the most intimidating classes in the game. You have ridiculous self-healing, you have immunity to physical damage, you have huge magical damage shields, you have summons that allow you to control corners you can't even see. This class is crazy when fully geared. But when you first make your Warlock, you're going to feel like a little bitch. You're going to be slow, you're not going to hit hard, it's going to be hard to cast your spells, and the life cost of your spells is absolutely brutal. Warlock is a class that's heavily restricted by both gear and spell slots. This means that as you progress your character, your starting build, your mid-game build, and your late-game build are all going to be very different. There's different breakpoints and milestones you need to reach before switching between certain skills and certain spells, and we're going to talk about all of that in today's video. We're going to talk about how you can start from nothing and build up your Warlock in just a couple of hours. Let's start by talking about your starting build. When you first make your Warlock and you're a naked little bitch. So the most important passive that we're going to be taking is Tortured Mastery. This is going to cause multiple of our spells to heal us whenever they tick for DOT damage. This tooltip is actually wrong. It applies to more spells than it says. The second thing we're going to look to take is Dark Reflection. So Dark Reflection will make it so whenever we get hit, we reflect 10 damage back to our enemies. And when we're in starter gear and just starting, that 10 damage can really give us that little bit of reach that we need to kill people. Remember, this is a class that's really going to struggle in PvP in the early game, but having something like Dark Reflection will give us just a little bit more reach to have a chance to kill them. Malice is going to be our third pick. So Malice is going to give us 10% will. That will is actually going to increase our curse duration, and it's also going to increase our spell power, and it's going to give us magic resistance. So it's a pretty nice kind of all-around little buff. And then finally, we're going to be taking Vampirism. So Vampirism is going to increase your magical healing by 20%. So what that means is every fifth tick of our damage over time effects, because of Tortured Mastery, we're going to be healed 2 instead of 1 with Vampirism. And that might not sound like a lot, but when we get over to our spells, Curse of Pain is going to tick a total of 10 times. So over the course of those 10 ticks, we're going to heal 12 instead of 10. Again, doesn't sound like a lot. Here's the thing. It costs 5 life to cast. So we're gaining 7 life instead of gaining 5 life over the full duration. And the difference between 7 and 5 is like 40%, right? So this is why Vampirism is so important, because it increases our healing by quite a bit, actually. It ends up being like 40% more healing. This is going to make our sustain a lot better, and it's going to make us fight a little bit better in fights, and it's going to allow us to cast some of our other spells that normally would be difficult to cast because of the life cost. For our skills, we're going to be taking Blow of Corruption. So the reason we're taking BOC when we're leveling, and like in the early game, is because we just need a way to actually be able to kill people. We really don't have any kind of threat in the early game. We don't have a lot of damage. Our character's fairly slow. It's really difficult to win fights and kill people in the early game. BOC gives us a way to actually kill somebody if we're in a position where we have to. Now, Phantasm can be nice in the early game for escaping, but I think a lot of times if you end up like Phantasming running, you're pulling all these mobs and like things just get really chaotic very quickly. And it can be decent, but I think the number of times when Phantasm is good is less than the number of times when Below Corruption is good in the early game when you first start your character. Okay, so let's talk about spells. So these 3 spells over here, you're going to be always running on every single lock character. The first is Power of Sacrifice. So this will apply a DOT and will also give strength. So this is cast on enemies as a damage over time effect. It ends up doing more damage than it gives them health. And the other thing is that it procs the shit out of Tortured Mastery. And so this ends up healing us, despite it not saying that it does. And then we're also going to be running Curse of Pain, of course. And this is going to do a nice amount of damage on application. And then it's going to tick for 10 times for 1 damage a tick. And each of those ticks is going to heal us. So in PvE, we're going to be applying both of these when we need to heal. And that's going to give us a significant amount of life regen when combined with Vampirism. We're also going to be taking Bolt of Darkness. So Bolt of Darkness does bonus damage on headshot, reduced damage on limb shot, normal damage on body shot. But it also scales off of willpower and everything else. So if you get like good headshots with this, with a naked Warlock, I think it hits for like 38 or 40. So this is quite a bit of damage. It also gives us a little bit of reach, which can help us in kind of longer range fights against like rangers and mages and that kind of thing. It also can be useful for kiting once we get a little bit of gear. Finally, we're going to be taking Life Drain. So Life Drain is just going to be used primarily in PvE just to heal us up. And so we're going to, get into a fight. We're going to try to hit them with a spell as they're running in. We're going to hit them with a BOC and just try to one-tap them plus Dark Reflection, when they hit us. And then when they're dead, we're going to life drain off of mobs to fully heal back up. So the main game plan of the Warlock is to basically kite melee classes to death and then be able to choose our fights against ranged classes. So we're going to talk about the first things that you should buy and the items that you always need to run with. The first is pretty obvious, which is the Spellbook. Spellbook is going to have a smaller movement speed penalty than a staff, and it's going to have slightly less damage, but it doesn't really matter. It's also going to have a slightly faster cast animation. So the Spellbook is going to allow us to kite enemies and drag out fights and all of that kind of thing. For our melee weapon, we're going to be looking for a falchion. So the falchion has decent range, and it's much easier to headshot, in my opinion, than with a longsword, and it's a lot easier to control space with a falchion. I also like it more for PvE because it's easier to hit multiple mobs. So we're going to be running a falchion and a spellbook. And the idea here is that we don't equip anything in our offhand for the falchion aside for a lantern, because lanterns now give positive movement speed. So we're going to get +7 movement speed from a white lantern. I think it's 6 from a gray. And then the falchion in our main hand. And then the switch is going to be spellbook. And this is going to give us the kind of mobility that we need to kite it out. There's one more item, though, that was just buffed in this patch, which is the Occultist Boots. I don't know if this is a typo or what is going on, but Occultist Boots give very high armor, 1 knowledge at gray, and if they're green, they also give 1 will. And for some reason, 14 movement speed, which for reference, green Lightfoots give 9. So it's almost double the movement speed of Lightfoots. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. So this is your main core setup that you're always going to be looking to get. The falchion, the lantern, the spellbook, and the Occultist Boots. Magical healing is the thing that's going to take you from these early game builds into more of the mid and late game builds. And magical healing is going to enable you to cast more spells, spam out more stuff. And the other thing that we're going to need is spell capacity to run more of these larger spells. So the first thing that we're going to be picking up as we get a little bit of magical healing is the Eldritch Shield. So once you have +1 magical healing, I will drop Life Drain and run Eldritch Shield. So Eldritch Shield is going to make your fights against mages and against clerics and against other warlocks much better. This actually destroys those classes because it's spammable and it only costs 5 life. And like a 40 magic shield will actually eat like an entire fireball from a mage. And the other thing is against warlocks, it actually turns off their healing while it's on you because they're not technically dealing damage to you. So if you're fighting a warlock and you put this on yourself, their Curse of Pain and Power of Sacrifice no longer heals them. So this is really, really powerful. And this is going to give us the survivability that we need. I would also suggest that once you get, like maybe 1 magical healing and this core setup of the falchion, the lantern, the spellbook, and the Occultist Boots, that's when I would switch your active from BOC to Phantasm. And the reason for that is because you're going to be able to start kiting out people. You're going to be able to start outrunning them. You're going to be able to start, just out healing them, resetting with Phantasm, all this stuff. And so this is when I would switch from BOC to Phantasm. And then finally, when you get just a little bit more knowledge, and I would suggest that you don't play Hydra until you get at least 2 magical healing. But once you get to +2 magical healing, then you're going to be equipping Hydra. And that's when Warlock starts to come online. You'll be able to, cast your Hydra and heal off of it. You'll be able to stand in zone perpetually, all of that stuff. And so this is when Warlock really starts to come online. So as a quick recap, we're first going to be looking for the Falchion, Lantern, Spellbook, and Occultist Boots. And once we acquire those, we're going to be switching from Blow Corruption to Phantasm. And then in terms of spells, as soon as we get 1 magical healing, we're going to switch the Life Drain for Eldritch Shield. And then when we get to 2 magical healing, that's when we're going to start trying to run the Hydra. Thank you guys for watching the video. Sorry about my voice. I've been sick the last few days. And then also, sorry about the lack of end-game clips. I had a lot more fully geared clips, but I filled up my hard drive and lost a bunch of them and didn't realize. But anyway, I hope the video ended up pretty decent anyway. I'm happy about it. So if you guys liked it, leave a comment, leave a like, all that stuff. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.